We welcome you into the Fatheads Eyewear studio for another edition of Unverified every Tuesday night right here on YouTube. The chat is open. Kyle will guide that chat for you. You can send all of your comments and questions via the Unverified YouTube page and the comment section below. While you're there, don't forget to subscribe. Tony Donohue, David Land with you every Tuesday night. And I would walk up what we were going to talk about tonight and the list, but there is so much to discuss and break down from Thermal on Sunday. A lot of other things going on in the motorsports world this past weekend, including Formula One and NASCAR. But the talk of the IndyCar Facebook chat rooms, Twitter, Instagram, you name it, was about Thermal and what the hell happened on Sunday afternoon prior to Alex Palou and that final dominating stint, taking the lead and taking the win. David, welcome back to the show. As mentioned, Kyle is here with the chat as well. But, boy, do we have a lot to break down from Sunday, my guy.
Yeah, big show this week. There's no doubt about it. I mean, this is kind of what we, for better or for worse, this is what we designed this show to do, is to discuss weekends like this one. Because there's a lot of controversy. Some of it, I think we can kind of hopefully maybe, die the fires down a little bit on, and at least try to give people an understanding of what happened and what caused some of the controversy that we saw. And also, it's a platform, it's a forum for us, not only us, to discuss what needs to happen in the future, particularly with Thermal, but it's a platform for you guys in the chat to kind of let your voices be heard and, kind of be a part of this show. And actually, Kyle, right before he came on the air, mentioned that there's a great chat question already. So, Kyle, what is it?
Well, I think this sets the tone that I think is pretty funny. David, where the hell is the Puma hat? Where has it gone? This would have been a perfect Puma hat moment.
I still got to wash it. I think I lost a bet to you about 4 or 5 years ago that I had to wash the Puma hat, and I have yet to do that yet.
It was disgusting.
Yeah.
It was absolutely feral.
It's still feral. It's still feral. But no, yeah, that's a hell of an inside baseball reference there. Yeah, I used to, when there was controversy afoot, would put on this Puma hat that I got at Meyer in like 2013. Looks good on my head. It just needs a bit of a wash. But a lot of controversy this week. I don't even know where we should start. I suppose, Tony, we'll begin with the Fox Sports blackout. And I guess we can kind of make this our Dude Bro Sources segment as well.
Yeah.
Understand, at least from the statements that IndyCar gave to a few outlets throughout the kind of immediate fallout of the Thermal Club race, that it was a circuit breaker that failed on one of the trucks. And that's what caused a power outage, and that's what caused the broadcast to go out. There was some misinformation kind of floating around if it was the Thermal Club that had a power issue. That turned out to be not true. There were all sorts of speculation, as there is in a crisis situation like this. But was there anything, Tony, that you kind of learned about this particular issue that maybe you could share with the viewers and give us a better perspective about what happened?
Well, let's go back to what exactly happened.
Sure.
I was watching via my TV, which was connected to an antenna. So there was no delay for me. It wasn't through any kind of feed or any kind of app. This was straight through whatever you want to call it, rabbit ears antenna. So I'm watching. I've got you and your YouTube stream up, and we're kind of going back and forth, having some fun in there with the DL500 Club members. And then I also have my app up. And my app, I'm on board. I think I was on board with either Pato or whatever, keeping track telemetry-wise. So I've got three screens going. My TV goes out first. It freezes. And I'm like, that's odd. That's odd because I'm not like, it's not like I'm not on Wi-Fi, right? I'm straight hardwired, so to speak, if that's a term you want to use. And then my phone, the app, the IndyCar app goes out. That freezes. And I'm going, what in the world is happening? What's going on? And then you were about 30 seconds behind me on YouTube, and I was kind of typing on Twitter and typing through the chat room to you, like, did anybody else's just freeze? And it was everybody. And it was like one of the most what the hell moments that I think I've had watching an IndyCar race in a very long time. So from what I had heard, kind of along the lines of what you just said, was that and they supposedly had rebuilt one of these or multiple of these trucks in the off season. I don't know if it was a bunch of factors that went into it. Obviously, when those went down, it's going to take a while to reboot. They go to the NASCAR race. I think you mentioned this on your video, which I thought was like, hey, what are we going to do? We're going to play commercials, or are we just going to go to the NASCAR race that we have on FS1, which I thought was an okay idea, an okay plan. But it seemed to me, it was very hot out there. It seemed like those generators were running. So obviously, everything from the app to the IndyCar on Fox broadcast to IMS Radio Network, because IMS Radio Network was out momentarily as well. So it seems like, I don't know if we can just sum it up as that the power source was that truck, and when that failed, everything failed. Obviously, IMS Radio Network, you can't have dead air. They go to a recorded interview with their friend Jason Van Sickle. They were up first, so you and I were both sending people that direction, like, hey, you can listen on their app. I mean, I even gave out one of my cheat codes, which is from my old radio days at 107.5 The Fan. I'm like, here's a number you can dial in, and there's no delay. It's up to the minute, or up to the second, excuse me. But yeah, and it just, we weren't talking I don't want to say doom and gloom heading into the weekend as far as what most fans think of thermal, that race, that track. But regardless of whose fault it was, which doesn't seem like it was Fox's fault, it was probably whoever rebuilt that truck, whether that's the company, whether that's a couple different people. I know Doug Bowles mentioned they're going to investigate it to figure out what's going on, as they should. But bottom line, it was like majority of IndyCar fans that are already upset that they're at thermal, this just added to that fire and that hatred that we saw, that probably 85% of the fans, unless you're there, unless you're in the Facebook groups, were like, hey, this is just the final straw. And I felt for a lot of fans that I was reading on Twitter and interacting with, this was like their final straw for thermal. I don't think it's going to be the end of thermal. I would imagine it's going to be back on the schedule. But at the end of the day, it certainly, for lack of a better term, was not a good look all around for everybody involved.
Right. And the buck's going to stop with somebody. Yep. I mean, there was a point, to your point about the confusion and kind of the chaos right as that happened. There was a point where I'm like, okay, if the power, because that was when the rumors about the power going out were starting to float around. And I'm like, if they don't have timing and scoring, because we lost timing and scoring for a little while on the apps, and I'm going, is the race even green?
Yeah,
we
had no clue.
We had no idea what's going on in thermal. So that was crazy. To your point about NASCAR, at the time, I'm sitting there going,
yeah.
I'm like, oh no. I'm like, this is the worst thing. But actually, it makes some sense that Fox would go to NASCAR because they have the rights, number one. And number two, everybody who was probably watching IndyCar at thermal at that point, and suddenly there's no racing on, well, let's go to FS1. It was kind of a way to probably salvage a little bit the TV rating. To the point about the trucks, the other thing I guess I had heard about the trucks was that they had been refurbished. Mm-hmm. Again, rumors, but they had been refurbished this offseason because of the move to Fox. From what I understand, actually, Fox has a little bit of different broadcasting capabilities than NBC does. Someone had told me that they actually stream in 1080 rather than 720, which is something that NBC does. So there had to be some sort of retrofitting done to the trucks. And to your point, if that's the case, then potentially there was something changed on the trucks that caused some sort of an issue. And that's where we've ended up. So we kind of ended up with a situation where we weren't sure if it was Fox, we weren't sure if it was thermal. It sounds like the problem is somewhere within IMSP, which of course is owned by IndyCar. So then, Tony, I suppose I would ask what you think. I kind of gave my thoughts on it, but I suppose we'll discuss it. There were some statements given to media sources, but not a statement released by IndyCar themselves. I'm sure there will be coming if there's an investigation.
Has to be. Absolutely has to be.
But no statement as of the recording of this show, Tuesday night. How do you feel about the drivers apologizing right after the race?
I think awkward might be
for sure
the conversation, because I don't know how many drivers were running around and their engineer was coming on and saying, oh, by the way, the TV lost feed. I don't even know if the people in the timing and scoring box knew that, unless the timing and scoring went out there. That I don't know. I thought it was a little awkward. Alex Palou, I almost feel like, they told him, you saw him being told right before, like, hey, need to mention this. And I don't think he knew exactly what he was apologizing for. I think it was Palou that I think he thought he was apologizing for like running over or the race being too long.
That was Lundgaard.
Or Lundgaard. Okay. So then Alex Palou apologizing. So that's damage control, I think, for a little bit. That goes along the lines of when a new partner or something big comes up in IndyCar, there has to be an email that goes out. And it's all, when you see every driver retweet the same thing, this, like the Fox thing last year, this is big, this is great for our sport. You see that. There's an email chain that's going around saying, hey, can you please make sure you're retweeting this and you're mentioning it.
Which is fine.
Which is totally
I don't
fine.
think that's the worst thing in the world.
You're getting everybody to be on the same page with something. I don't know. I don't think that should have been on the drivers. That obviously had nothing to do with the drivers. It was probably... there was probably a lack of information to those drivers on what to say and what they were going to need to say. Look, at that point, everybody already knew what had happened, besides probably the drivers. Fresh out of the helmet, they probably didn't know. I would have, if it was me, I probably would have found a Doug Bowles or somebody of IndyCar stature higher up to like, hey, this was a great race. We understand that we understand what happened with the situation. We will get down to the bottom of it. We're not going to leave a stone unturned. We apologize. We're going to make sure this never happens again. And then you say we're going to open up an investigation on what happened, or we'll have a statement later on. I don't think it was really fair to have the drivers kind of apologize for something that they had nothing to do with. It was kind of awkward.
Let me play devil's advocate on that, because I have been thinking about this a little bit since I made that video and talked about it. And the one thing I would say is, yes, I don't love the idea of the drivers being the only ones to make a statement on something that they had no knowledge of until 5 seconds after they get out of the car, right? Like, the drivers really have nothing to do with it. The drivers are the face of your series, and the drivers are, for the most part, pretty much universally liked by the fans. There's very few drivers where any of the fans really have any trouble with them. I would say this, though, I guess I would understand from, and again, this is crisis management, right? Like,
yeah.
You got to figure out
on the run, on the fly.
And so I'm thinking in my head, a thought process to tell Alex Palou about that would be, if Palou gets out of that car and says something like, oh, that was amazing, I'm so glad the fans got to see the entire race, then it's like, whoops, PR disaster. So at least you give Alex a reason to go, okay, something did happen. They didn't see the entire race, so I shouldn't be too celebratory about the fans being able to see it, because, as Alex Palou, I don't know what the fans actually did or didn't see. So I think that's the only thing that I would go, okay, that makes sense.
Did they use the drivers, the 3 podium finishers in Palou, Pato, and Lundgaard as like lessening the blow? Like, hey, if the drivers come out and say something, maybe fans will be less harsh whenever somebody from IndyCar brass says something. Was it like a lessening of the blow?
No. I mean, I don't know if a fan, because we've seen it on social media.
Yeah.
Did Alex Palou, I don't think that was what they were going for.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe, but no. I think everybody is pretty well aware of how the fan base reacts to things at this point. Like, I mean, because
but softening the blow with the driver saying something, maybe it's like, okay, like you said, because they're all liked. Like,
sure.
You throw Mark Miles out there who, flip a coin on that one, that's not going to go over very well.
But you're right. But Doug talked to the media, right?
Yeah.
So I'm kind of curious why there wasn't like just a public statement, even if it was just something released on the social media channels.
I would agree.
The only thing I don't like about that is putting the onus on the drivers.
Yeah.
When the drivers are almost quite literally the last people that would have had anything to do with something like that as a failure. So that's it. I mean, I'm okay with informing the drivers and being like, hey, we had a problem, make sure you tailor your statement to that.
Yeah.
But outside of that, I think there just should have been a little bit more. That's all I would suggest.
And Kyle, let us know if there's some chats going on. I'm sure there's a lot of people that want to chime in on the weekend.
So the chat, the best thing in the chat so far, there's a couple questions that we'll get through later in the episode. But right now, my favorite thing that has to do with the drivers apologizing and the racing. Are people saying that, nah, man, Alex Palou should be apologizing after every win at this point?
Well, Lundgaard kind of apologized. Like, his apology was weird. He definitely did not understand what he was apologizing for.
Yeah.
Because if you listen to Lundgaard's apology, he was like, I'm sorry to everyone in Europe. The race was kind of long. And I'm like, what?
Yeah,
What are you talking about?
I'm European, so
Yeah,
weird.
he wasn't sure. I don't think at that point he kind of realized what had happened through the midpoint of that race. Again, it was a what the heck type of moment. It was everybody was scrambling for answers. Obviously, I'm sure everybody at IndyCar, there's going to be a statement, as you mentioned, from somebody.
There has to be.
Media is around on Thursday for the test at the IMS road course that we will get into. There's a perfect opportunity to have media in the room and to just kind of either, if you don't know what exactly happened yet, just say, hey, we're opening it up. We're going to dive into what happened, why it happened, and how to prevent it from happening again in the future. And again, this is like the first thing I would say, David, that we talked about when Doug Bowles took over that role as head of IndyCar. Sometimes you're not going to be able to play nice. Sometimes you're going to have bad pubs. Sometimes you're going to have to go out and make some statements. This is kind of I don't know if it's a test. If you want to put it as a test,
I would.
This is the first test for Doug Bowles, head of IndyCar, to now say, okay, here's and he'll own it. We know that he will. He'll be honest with us. He'll answer the questions that we need to know, and we'll go from there. So maybe Thursday's an opportunity to do that. But man, you just talk about Sunday with the NCAA tournament going on, NASCAR going on. You're a few weeks out from starting the month of May. You probably want to give yourself a good rating, have another good number. And we talked about this on the first show. I wasn't worried about the St. Pete number. I was worried about Thermal and Long Beach. And a 50% drop from St. Pete to round 2, 21 days later with, I'm going to beat you to it because I know you're going to say it, with an old car, the rating, 700,000 barely, maybe in some change. The rating was not good when we learned that information earlier today.
No. Not unexpected, though.
No, 100%. I think you called it on your YouTube channel.
On the DL 500 Club, I said it was going to be 700K.
I said 650, so I gave them a little less credit than I guess what they deserved.
Well, what I guess is there's a lot of things that are disappointing about this. I guess we'll get into it. It was, I think, 704,000 folks tuned in, which is down 84,000 from last year's TV rating on NBC, which took place at noon Eastern time. Mm-hmm. It was like 9 in the morning in California.
Remember we had to get there early.
Yeah, it was. That was a wild one. But so race 2, we're down from an NBC rating. After a 46% increase over last year. But if we go back 2 years, it was almost flat from 2020. Oh, and sorry, that was 2022. So 3 years ago, it was flat. It's a tough situation because you're also comparing yourself against other series. Formula One at 3 in the morning was at 800,000. NASCAR was at 2.5 million. Now that was down about 600,000 from their Las Vegas rating, which was 3.
Yes.
But again, like you mentioned, you're going up against the NCAA tournament. You're going to have a little bit of a drop. It wasn't a massive drop, at least in terms of percentage-wise. The one that should worry us a little bit is the fact that NHRA on FS1 was about 40,000 behind IndyCar after all of this controversy.
Yeah.
I will say this. This, I guess, will be my positive spin on it. I said about St. Pete, and I said it kind of to, I guess we'll say, shine a negative light on the St. Pete rating, which is St. Pete had the best possible scenario going into it from we're going to generate a TV rating perspective. And you got a 46% increase, sure, but you were flat from 2022. The thing that I suppose is, I'm going to say in a positive light, is that you had the worst case scenario in more aspects than one going into this. You had Thermal, which is an unpopular race with the fans, as we're going to talk about here in a bit.
Yep.
It's a race that had a 3-week break before it ran. It's a race that is going up directly against NASCAR at Homestead, one of the most popular tracks on the schedule, against the NCAA tournament in a very racing-heavy weekend where, if you're an open-wheel fan in the country, you might have been up at 3 in the morning watching another open-wheel race. So that's a difficulty. And then you have the blackout. You have all these other things. If your worst-case scenario is 700,000 people on Fox, that still beats most of the bad NBC ratings last year.
Yep.
So
Good
if
point.
this is worst case scenario, and we're looking for a kernel of positivity here, I guess it's better than the bottom was last year.
Which is good. And look, obviously with St. Pete, you had all of the lead up. It was all St. Pete or all Indy 500 when Fox was doing their promotions and the Super Bowl promotions, and then the big noon Saturday kickoff college football promotions, those type of things. Which brings us to the next conversation, continuing on with thermal, is where does this belong on the schedule? Because there are a lot of fans that are not happy that is on the schedule, period. We had a good battle for about 42 seconds between Christian Lundgaard and Alex Palou. Palou, who's on it, we'll get to his historic run that he's on, wins his second race in a row to start the season. A race is a 24-second gap on that last stint to win the race by what he ended up winning, like 6-7 seconds, I think it ended up being.
It was about 10.
About 10 seconds. Okay. So he wins by 10 seconds. They're already talking about a different configuration of the track. I get it. If you want to have thermal and you want to make it to be, like a prestigious, I hate to, like, this is not a comparison, but you get what I'm saying. Like Augusta type of place where it's hard to get in. And I think you should still celebrate, I think you should still have a general admission ticket. I think you should still allow people to show up on Sunday if they want to. It's not a bad deal what you have if you can manage it throughout the entire weekend where you get your food and your drink. But I need to see something more on track. I get it. We had, 257 passes or whatever it was. And it's like, okay, but again, the guy passing 12th for 11th doesn't really get me excited. Obviously doesn't get Fox excited because they didn't show a lot of those, obviously, when they were on. But what are your thoughts on what we've seen out of thermal? I know there was a lot of people that were there that were defending how great the racing was, but I think the casual fan tuning in and even the hardcore fan tuning in was left wanting a little bit more competition in that race.
Well, I have a bit of a point of contention with the idea of fans being in attendance at thermal, right? So I think you can't have it both ways. I think there's a lot of complaining about the fan base. There's not enough people that are going to go to thermal. Mm-hmm. But I would say, how many of those people complaining would have gone to thermal if it would have been easy to get to in the first place? Because even if you take the ticket out of it, you've got to fly to Cal. You and I, we work in IndyCar racing.
Yeah.
Were either of us there?
No,
we would have gotten in for free. Why? Because the lodging and the plane and the rental car. It's a huge expense 100%. For someone in the Midwest to go to thermal.
You got to win. Sometimes you got to win a Papa Shot contest just to get out there.
100%. But we see this in all the other California races that aren't Long Beach. What happened with Fontana? Bad crowd. What happens at Laguna Seca? Bad crowd. Long Beach, well, it's been the same race for 40 years, so it actually has a crowd. It's a prestigious race. It has all of those elements that I think people want out of the thermal club and aren't getting. But for me, you can't have it both ways. You can't be sitting there saying, oh, well, the tickets are limited and it looks bad on TV. You weren't going to go anyway.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't think they're keeping anybody out of thermal. I think they're right-sizing the event to what it is. Now, that being said, I think that the fan base has spoken loudly and clearly about thermal. And I will say this. I was very skeptical about a points race at thermal going into this. I leave with a much more positive impression of thermal than I did going in. Mm-hmm. It's clearly a track that is, to a certain extent, capable of putting on at least somewhat of an exciting, because I think the finish was fine. Now, yes, was the rest of it's kind of like judging the Indy 500 these days. The race is really pretty boring for the first 75% of it, and the last 25% was exciting. But I think that it was more exciting than most of the road course races we've seen in recent memory. So I can't take that away from thermal.
Yeah.
And I also can't take away the fact that they're willing to invest in this event. They're talking about reconfiguring the track for an IndyCar race when they've got all these members they have to take care of. I mean, they're committed. I'll give them that credit, but man, it's they're between IndyCar is between a rock and a hard place, because if you get rid of this race on the calendar, you're doing what the fans don't want, which is less races, and less races in particularly this part of the year. But then the fans are also saying we don't want it racing at thermal. I don't know. You can't win.
It's a lose-lose situation, it seems like. I'd be interested to see what the new reconfiguration of thermal looks like, because from my memory being there last year, there was a lot of that racetrack that he didn't use. It kind of reminded me of Watkins Glen, where they, sometimes they use this, NASCAR uses this configure. So there is something that can be done there.
They're talking specifically about putting a longer straightaway in.
Okay.
That's the big thing that I've seen.
So what I would say, and this is what's told to me by somebody inside of the paddock that I certainly trust, is that, thermal has to be ready to host a big event. And there was a lot of issues inside the paddock beyond, the TV going out that thermal needs to adjust to. And I'm sure that is a place, like I said, I've been there, that is going to be, if they're, like you said, if they're willing to add a straightaway and reconfigure that track, they're going to be willing to do whatever it takes. Now, remember, a lot of the teams, and I heard this I talked to a few crew guys yesterday, a lot of these teams don't like going out there. It's a bunch of different reasons. One, it's like, okay, we got to make 3 to 4 trips out to California. Remember last year, the night before the race, when that windstorm ripped through and caused a lot of teams some damage from their tents that they kept overnight. So the fans and a lot of the crews are going, man, it's like strike 1 and strike 2 against thermal already. With that being said, when you have a place like that, which money seems to not be an option, it's whatever it takes, whatever needs to get done, let's get it done. I do think thermal can make the proper adjustments to make this IndyCar race and this IndyCar event better year after year, make it more competitive, and do what they have to do to make sure that everybody, albeit hard to get out there, can feel welcome when they show up at the gates and want to put this on their to-do list for years to come.
I agree, but there's a lot of things that you're saying so far that are a lot of shit happens type things, right? Like storms coming through and tearing up tents happens in karting. I mean, it happens once or twice a year. Like you can't. It doesn't matter where you go. That can happen. And also,
yeah, but you're always going to have that bad memory.
Yeah,
I mean, we've all been to a racetrack where you've had a bad memory, and so that takes away the benefit of the doubt. Yeah, it's a one-time occurrence, and I understand that, but to people maybe who don't think clearly sometimes and have a one-track mind of like, oh, well, I hate that place because this happened, or you could hate a place just because your favorite driver wrecked, and that's just how fans operate.
That's true. The other thing too is back to the broadcast is I work in broadcasting, so I mean I can relate a little bit to having power issues. I mean David was there at Supernats when literally our system that was supposed to be, it's called a UPS. It's like an uninterruptible power system, and it's supposed to literally keep the power going if you do have a power outage. And our system that was supposed to save us from power outage caused a power outage. So there's things put in place on these trucks to literally keep the power going if you lose power, and they freaking lost power. It had to have been a crazy set of circumstances for them to lose power. So it's like shit happens.
I'm not blaming anybody except for whoever built that truck, and I'm sure they'll look into it, whether it was the heat or whatever it was.
It's just also in a shit happens sense of the fact that it was thermal is crazy.
That's
right?
what it is, though. That's going to be the issue. If this happened at Long Beach or this happened at Mid-Ohio, I think fans would have some leniency towards it because it's a track that they've probably been to and they probably have liked.
It happened at St. Pete in NBC's first race.
Okay, and what was the reaction to that?
I'm sure I remember everybody. I remember calling it strike 2 because they missed the start of the 2018 championship race. But I feel like people, to your point, didn't judge it as harshly or weren't saying, "Oh my God, we can't go back to St. Pete after that." Right? Here's the other thing about the dust storm and the fans being mad with thermal. I think the big issue with thermal and the mountain that they're going to have to overclimb right now is the fact that the first impression of thermal for the teams, the fans, and I guess maybe the broadcast partner, if it is true that being out in the middle of nowhere in the desert caused an issue, is that your first impression has been bad.
Yeah.
How do you overcome that? It's going to be tough. I'll tell you what.
Whatever that All-Star race was last year didn't seem to do what it wanted to do as well. So, they've changed to a points race, but last year...
I have a suggestion.
Go for it.
If money's no issue, just build a 2-mile oval, 2-mile banked oval. We'll bring back Fontana. There we go. Money's no issue, boys.
But then you're still in the middle of nowhere.
Thermal 500. I don't care.
You just said people don't go to Fontana because it's hard to get to.
Well, yeah.
You just said that
it's hard to get to because it's expensive.
Yeah.
I was in Brooklyn, Michigan last week, and that is the middle of nowhere, and I'm still advocating for them.
But it's in the middle of nowhere, 4-hour drive from Indianapolis.
Well, that's true. That's true. But again,
if you just said Fontana, people didn't go to it because it was out in the middle of nowhere.
If they're going to pay a $2 million sanctioning fee, and on top of that, money's no issue, we're going to reconfigure and do whatever we want. 2-mile oval. That's all I'm saying.
They got the room. That's for sure.
That's what I'm saying.
They certainly have the room.
Thermal 500. I'm telling you, it sounds awesome, doesn't it? Thermal 500.
We can only wish. We can only dream. Kyle, do we have any more comments as we kind of wrap up the TV side of things and the competitive side of things before we start looking at some Alex Palou and driver situations from the weekend?
So Taurus said IndyCar keeps having the problem of tracks being reconfigured to make other series work better. NASCAR. But now has a track willing to change to help them out. Stay with them.
I would agree.
That's a good point.
I would agree. David, I'm going to ask you this. I'm going to put you on the spot here because this was mentioned many times. It is a bumpy track. It seemed like it was hot out there. Not as hot as it is right now, but over the weekend it was pretty warm up there. What in the world is going on with these hybrid situations?
Oh, God. So I think
because I'll say this. You can ask the question, what good has thermal done? And I think we've done a good job over the last 25-plus minutes being fair on thermal, being fair on the future of thermal, and being fair on what thermal has brought to the table. Now, you can go back to when we first started hearing about this about a year ago, and then obviously the testing that was happening, and then Mid-Ohio. What good has the hybrid brought to the table? Maybe it saved Honda for a couple years. I don't know. But it just seems like it just continues to be a damn issue.
Well, it's funny you mentioned Honda. They have not been the ones that have been having the hybrid issues. Mm-hmm. Now, there's two problems with thermal and the hybrid. Number one, you mentioned it, the bump, particularly out of turn 16, where they had shaved it down. But what happens when you shave a bump down? The engineers immediately make the cars stiffer, and so the bump was just as much of a problem, if not more than it was last year. And what a bump like that does is it breaks the bell housing, which has been one of the new parts that has been added to the car with the hybrid system. So there's issue number one. Issue number two has been the heat, particularly with the Chevy cars, it seems. And really, we had this issue in St. Pete, too. So I don't think that's just totally a thermal problem. It seems to be a Chevy plus hybrid problem right now. Marshall Pruitt wrote an article on Racer talking about the radiator blockers that they use, or the radiator. I don't remember exactly what the word is, but they have some radiator parts that they can kind of move up and down and block the radiators to get more speed, get more power out of the engine. Well, when that happens and you cut off the cooling to the hybrid unit or the engine or whatever, you're just running it more, with a much smaller margin. And it seems like right now, whatever Chevy has advised their teams to do with those radiator blockers is too much. Yeah. And they probably need to open them up a little bit. That would be my speculation based on all of the information given. But as far as I am aware, Hondas have not had an issue with the hybrids. To your important question, to your tough question, look at me dodging the bullet. No, I mean, I think the hybrids were a mistake. Yeah. Like, straight up, they were a mistake. Expensive for the teams, too heavy for the cars. Now, I think there's a scenario and a universe where you can do hybrid with IndyCar and it works. But I don't think it works with a 13-year-old car and trying to,
like lipstick on a pig?
Well,
there was a world where you could run Indy cars with a hybrid. It was 13 years ago. Go ahead.
Well, exactly. Yes, and that's the thing too, is that the technology's so old now. I'm kind of surprised Honda made as big of a point about it as they did. But from the perspective of the technology, I think you could implement a a hybrid unit, but you were not ever going to be able to do it with the current rule set. And I think that was just a mistake. And we talk about cost, and we talk about how much things are going to cost. I mean, my God, how much, and I hate to do this because I always do this every show, but how much money, how many new cars could we have bought worth of parts have we thrown on the DW12? I mean, it's wild.
Well, yeah, and you think about we've talked about rumors of maybe teams selling and those type of things. It's like, if I'm coming in to buy an IndyCar team, I don't really want to probably buy one until I know there's a new car, and I can just go ahead and buy that new car instead of buying chassis that are going to be probably show cars by 2028 or 2029, decked out in whatever Big Ten team wins the championship when the college basketball tournament's in town. You were on the IndyCar Radio Network twice over the weekend. You got your Kmart IndyCar Radio Network hat on.
Different radio network, though, believe it or not. This is the Kart Radio Network.
There you go. What was that, 94-ish?
Yeah, it would have been this hat's probably 95 or 96.
So Alex Palou gets it done. He was 2-1 favorites going in. By the time the green flag waved on Sunday, he was a plus 150 favorite. For those that don't know, I mean, that's just
that's
about
pretty much guaranteeing he's going to win.
Yeah, that guaranteed that he was more than likely going to win that race. It's been a historical tear over his last 39 races, which was the final race of the 2022 season in which he won. He's had an average finish of 4.7. He's well on his way to possibly winning his 4th championship before he even makes his 100th career start in IndyCar. I asked you this last week. Are we at the point where we're tired of Alex Palou winning? And you said in your video, this dude might rip off 3, 4, 5, 6 in a row. He obviously hasn't won an oval yet. He's had his hiccups at the Indianapolis 500. But what a start to the season for the number 10 Chip Ganassi Racing Team.
Well, if you look at the points right now, if he puts 10 points on Pato in the next race, he is a race ahead of the entire field. He's a race ahead 3 races in. That's pretty tough. It's not.
Is this why the playoff system was talked about at the end of last year?
Well, okay. Well, I mean, we can talk about that in a Dude Bro source at some point.
Yes.
But playoffs.
We'll call it the Alex Palou Memorial
Playoffs
Playoffs.
Well, it's a yellow car. It's much like Matt Kenseth causing all sorts of trouble. But Alex Palou, it's not unprecedented to win the first 2 or even the first 3 races of the year. A lot of people reminded me because I forgot most of 2020, to be honest with you, that Scott Dixon won the first 3. I think Will Power won the first 2 around 2010. I'm sure Sebastian Bourdais did it in Champ Car a couple of times. Sam Hornish did it in IRL first 2 races in 01. So it's not super unprecedented to have a driver rip off a couple of wins to start the season. But to your point, Alex Palou is right now on pace to be a generational talent in IndyCar. He is ahead of Scott Dixon in all percentages, period. Career percentages. He's ahead of Scott Dixon in every single one of them, not only to this point in his career, but all time. With Scott Dixon, I think the win percentage, it's higher. I mean, it's crazy.
Well, and you think
Alex Palou's doing right now.
And you think about the stat that I just put out and how there's a chance for him to win a 4th championship before his 100th start. And shout out to Brian, who I know is watching. He mentioned, and don't forget those first 14 starts are with Dale Coyne Racing. Right, and then he hops in Chip Ganassi's number 10 and kind of resurges that car. We hadn't seen that car championship contender-wise. I think it only won 1 race in almost a decade. Was it 2012 through, and then whenever Felix won, was that 2020? Yeah. So, like I said, almost a decade, 8 years. What Alex Palou is doing right now is incredible. I want to see him win on an oval, obviously, and I think he would tell you, kind of like Scott McLaughlin last year. He was like, McLaughlin goes, now I'm a complete IndyCar driver now that I've won on an oval. I'm going to take it's almost like Peyton Manning. And I know you're going to say, oh, whatever. But you remember Peyton, the big game was eluding him for a while.
Yep.
But Palou's winning championships. I'm just going to sit back and not be mad when Alex Palou wins races because I'm just going to sit back and go, you got to appreciate and understand what he's doing and how remarkable it is that he's doing it, how consistently he's doing it, because there was a stretch there. I think I jinxed it. I asked him, I think it was 18 top 10s in a row at one point, and then I think he got taken out at Road America 2 years ago by one of his teammates.
Marcus
Ericsson. And for me, I mean, I appreciate what Alex Palou's doing. He's been nothing but nice to you, nothing but nice to me. I have no qualms about it. So at this point, I'm just, you know what? I like plenty of other drivers, But if I'm going to sit back and watch an ass whipping, I may as well sit back and watch an ass whipping.
What's his 100th start going to be?
I think it's early next year.
Oh, okay. So he's going to win. So I thought that
somebody in the chat might be able to tell us. I think his 100th start is possibly early next year.
Okay. Because I was wondering if his 100th start is going to come this year.
Yeah.
And that was good. I was going to go, okay, well, I'll tell you when he can clinch the championship or when he couldn't.
Yeah.
I think, well, here's the thing about the Indianapolis 500, and I think, Peyton Manning, it took a little while for Peyton to even get close to knocking on the door. Alex Palou has been knocking on the door since his second start in the Indianapolis 500. Need we forget the fact that he did have the best car in 2021, and ultimately it was the fact that Helio Castroneves was a 3-time winner at that point and went on to his 4th. He was able to outfox Alex Palou. I think Alex Palou today outduels Helio Castroneves for that win. So
agreed.
I think he may end up winning the Indy 500. If not this year, it'll be
he's
soon.
certainly going to win one.
Yeah.
And you go back to the dominating performance that he had in 2022 before Renus took him out. And he still climbed. He went to the back of that pack, and I still think
Drove
he was,
it right
was
up
he
through
top
there.
5?
Yeah.
I think he still finished inside the top 5. So I'm just appreciative of what Alex Palou is doing right now, I guess, from that perspective.
It's greatness. Greatness.
And one would say this, and maybe this isn't the proper argument, but when you're looking for a champ, yes, you're looking for the Indianapolis 500. Every driver, all 34, that are going to be entered into the Indianapolis 500 coming up in the month of May are gunning for the Indianapolis 500 win. But not winning the Indianapolis 500 is not the worst thing in the world for a championship, because we see time and time again that Indianapolis 500 winner doesn't have the best performances over the next couple of weeks. It's usually Detroit, Road America, and I believe Gateway's in there now. But it's hard to do all that media and then show up at the track on Friday, hop in and go. You usually a step or two behind. So
yeah, but if Alex Palou's 2 races ahead,
if he's 2 races ahead, hell, you may just take it off. Just take off the Detroit. No, I'm just kidding. Don't do that. Other quick shout-outs, McLaren, front row, Pato Award on the pole, finishes second. Christian Lundgaard grabs his first podium in a Chevy, his first podium for Aero McLaren in his second start. I was impressed by what we saw out of McLaren. I was also impressed by what we saw consistency-wise over the first 2 races, and I know you mentioned this last week, between Meyer Shank and what Felix Rosenqvist and Marcus Armstrong's been able to do. They finished inside the top 10. Felix is off to a really good start. Andretti, pretty good weekend. Marcus had a moment on the start and then biffed it on fresh tires. When he spun, I think you jinxed him. I jinxed him. I sent him a text before the race. Probably jinxed him as well. But was impressed certainly by Meyer Shank's performance to start the season and by what McLaren did, although they did not end up ultimately winning the race.
Lot to break down there. Number one, McLaren. I think Pato Award finally has a true equal. We've never seen this before.
Is he a championship contender, Christian Lundgaard?
I got to see him on an oval.
Okay.
Got to see him on an oval.
Right.
I wouldn't be surprised to see him be competitive at the Indy 500. I'll put it that way.
Yes.
But when we get to like Gateway, Milwaukee, Iowa, where's that 7 car going to be? Because Alexander Rossi is the kind of driver who was going to get pretty consistent top 10s on ovals in that car. Obviously, Christian has stepped up the performance of that machine on the road courses and the street courses. Is he a better oval driver than Alexander Rossi at this point in his career? Probably not.
No.
So where will he shake out? And so once we kind of get into a couple of ovals, I mean, Indy's a little bit different. So I think past Indy, maybe past Gateway, I'd be able to give you a better understanding of that. Of course, if he starts ripping off wins, you don't need ovals to win the championship. Alex Palou has clearly shown that.
Great point.
I think the thing that's going to be interesting throughout this season, and I'm going to make a Formula One reference here, does Pato and Lundgaard kind of turn into Senna and Prost, where they are too equal, too competitive? I was kind of surprised. I teased it on IndyCar Radio. I was kind of trying to manifest. I find that I have some manifestation powers these days, as evidenced by the TV rating. And I said, sorry, guys. And I was like, you know what? What's going to happen with these 2 boys when they get down there in turn 1? Are they going to run into each other? Turned out it was the Prema guys who ran into each other at the back. But I think that I think Lundgaard and Award are just pushing each other further forward up the grid. I think there's an argument to be made that they're the second best team in IndyCar right now. We'll see. Meyer Shank Racing, I kind of told you that I expected them to take a step up in performance this year. It's clear that they have, and quite honestly, I don't think people are ready for this. If you look at the results, they were the second and third best Ganassi-affiliated cars ahead of even Scott Dixon. Now, Dixon, of course, had an off day. He was the second best Ganassi car at St. Pete, but I think Meyer-Shank Racing is knocking on the door. And if old Alex Palou ever has any problems, which he clearly isn't right now, maybe they'll have a chance of winning a race. Marcus Ericsson, again, I got called out on IndyCar radio. Mark Jane said, give me 3 drivers. I gave him Palou. That was a good choice. I gave him Ericsson, bad choice, and Scotty McLaughlin, another bad choice. But the big, he was the wrong Penske driver because I knew one of the Penskes was going to come up through the field. They all qualified bad. Picked the wrong one. I should have realized that Will Power, one of Will Power's best wins last year was Iowa, where he started deep in the field. Strategy got him up to the front, and he stayed there. This one, he drove to the front from 21st starting position to 6th. Will Power, we talked about him. Bad St. Pete. Awful start in a contract year where you're trying to impress. Every race is an audition. This is a hell of an audition at Thermal.
Yeah, here's what I thought about Will Power over the weekend. You know, going in, you want to just erase St. Pete. I'm sure he, as well as Nolan Siegel, but certainly Will Power, was ready to get the Thermal. Then they have the qualifying issues where they're all starting towards the back. McLaughlin had his issue with Devlin on lap 1, which we will get into. But Will Power drove his ass off to 6th. That was, we talked a lot with Will Power last year, and he was in the championship contention. And I asked him, I said, will you go back when you look at the ones that got away? And he goes, absolutely, I will. What we saw on Sunday at Thermal, barring Alex Palou running away with the entire thing, was a championship performance drive by Will Power, which he did so many times last year, which kept him in the hunt for that championship. Now, obviously, you can't do anything when, your seatbelt gets loose, and what happened at Nashville, even though it was still, and he told us after Milwaukee, because you and I were the first two to talk to him fresh out of the car on Sunday, was like, it's going to take a lot to win the championship. Nonetheless, I think when Will Power is in contention to win the championship at the end of this season, regardless of what his contract is or not, because we should have a pretty clear picture of what that looks like by the time we get to the final race of the year, we're going to look back in Thermal and say, that could have been another crap day. He could have been 0 for 2 on the season starting out. He drove his ass off. That was a classic Will Power drive on Sunday going from 21st to 6th.
Yeah. No, and if Scott Dixon has proven anything over the years, you don't need St. Pete to win a championship. Championship for Will Power started at Thermal, and that was a great start.
You get 1 or 2 races. I think one, for sure, you get a throwaway race. Maybe a second, depending on where you finish in that race. McLaughlin finishes last. Was this his throwaway race? Where if you're going to be a championship contender, and I think he will tell you he was disappointed with the results down in St. Pete, finishing 4th. I think every driver gets 1, maybe 2 throwaway races, but the way Alex Palou is performing right now, you're only going to get 1.
Well, Scott should have won St. Pete. I think Scott had the best car at St. Pete, and ultimately it was the strategy choice on the tires that cost him that race. And that was, and you want to talk about the greatness in IndyCar racing, more often than not, is reliant, at least in part, with luck. And with Palou, he probably had the second best car at St. Pete, but because of the fact that his strategist, Barry Wanzer, made the right call on the tires, that's what got him out front. And Scott McLaughlin ultimately ended up with Bupkis. Scotty's a fighter, though. I suppose we should start talking about this because Scott, he was my pick because I knew Scott and the Thirsty Threes were going to be charging up through the field. He started on the primary tires. They were going with, I think, what was ultimately the winning strategy for Alex Palou, which was probably to go with a thicker set of reds towards the end of the race. I think probably Will Power did the same thing. Started on the primaries, but didn't even get to take the green flag because he got taken out by Devlin DeFrancesco coming to the green flag, and it's very rare that we see a crash before the start of the race. I think they came down. The field was pretty spread out, and I remember kind of thinking to myself, I'm a little bit worried about this. You're always worried when the guys at the back are charging to catch up. It caught out Devlin. He took Scott out. Scott remained in the race, actually had a hybrid issue. He stayed in it towards I think he actually completed the race, or he retired a couple of laps before the finish. But it's something that I've seen personally with Scott McLaughlin before.
You and me both.
Yeah.
And different scenarios.
Different scenarios. I mean, I'll tell this story because I guess it's kosher now to go ahead and film the drivers when they're fighting with people. Milwaukee last year.
There's a verb for that we're not going to use.
I walked up to Scott after the race. He was kind of walking my direction. I said, Scott, can I get an interview with you? Because I think he finished like second or third. And I was like, you had a good race. Let's talk. And he was like, yeah, hang on. I'll go talk to Lanus real quick. I'm like, okay, well, that's cool. I'm sure. I remember they gotten close in the race. They both started on the front row. And there's a little bit of contact. But I was like, it wasn't that bad. But if you've ever seen, there's a video on YouTube where Al Unser Jr. sets Paul Tracy straight after the Michigan 500.
Yeah.
And it was that.
Yeah.
Scott read the riot act to old Lanus. And, it was something. And I sat there and I said, I could film this. I could get some clout.
Yep.
But you know what? I'm not going to do I should have done it.
Yep.
Apparently, I should have done it because it would have gone ridiculously viral. But I'm also not working for the broadcast partner.
Exactly. So. That's probably why. So Bob Pockris records a video of Devlin and Scott yelling at each other, dropping F-bombs. And I've been in twice with Scott McLaughlin, where I have witnessed him and another driver having a heated conversation. A couple years ago with the teammate, last year, I believe, was with Santino Ferrucci. And I said to him, hey, I won't bring any of that up. I didn't record it. Do you want me to ask you about it when I talk to you about it on camera? And I think Santino said no when I talked to him last year. Then the McLaughlin one was during the rain delay at Gateway 2 years ago, and I said, hey, he goes, yeah, just don't bring that up. It's all good. So, which is fine. You and I in this room have talked about this endless times about not screwing over a driver or putting something out there. I had a case of that this year in St. Pete with Mr. Well, I'm not even going to say it because do what?
Tony's walking up to that edge right now.
You're walking up to the edge there.
Yeah. If you want to know, ask me privately off the air.
He's a flirting with disaster.
Yeah. So, but they get into it from what Devlin posted afterwards. They then again talked, cleared everything up. Emotions are running high. Devlin is a driver that people don't give the benefit of the doubt to, I would say. I think Scotty Mack was probably pretty pissed off that, he got dumped, but also pretty pissed off that he was in the back. And that's what kind of led to that. I don't mind drivers beefing. I thought the best thing about it was perfect for Scott's one of Scott's sponsors.
They commented on Twitter about that.
Yeah, they commented on it. Did Good Ranchers, shout out to them. Hey, I've emailed you. Maybe this would be a perfect time to get yourself here on the Unverified
we love beef
show.
Here. We do love beef.
Definitely do.
Early on in the show, KP Digital actually had mentioned that they think that it was McLaughlin's fault in the incident. And honestly, I had thought the same thing. When I saw the onboards, like Scott's onboard, I thought looked bad.
Yeah.
They said the opposite. I think Scott's onboard looked bad because you just kind of see Devlin chuck in.
Yeah.
I think you can also look at how far down McLaughlin was. Like he should have probably given Dev more space at a start.
Yeah.
But also, if you look at the outside shot, it does look like McLaughlin's not, he's not arcing out like he should be on the exit of that corner. He's, kind of coming in, and it'd be perfectly understandable for Dev to have a little understeer there.
Yeah.
And just probably just not have the space to make that, especially with how
and you're on the
fast they were
curves right
charging.
there.
They did give Devlin the penalty, as Scott reminded
mentioned.
Devlin.
Yeah,
so
because IndyCar
But what
race
happened
control,
before that? It's because when Dev and Scott were yelling at each other, Dev mentioned, hey, we're supposed to be side by side through 15. Why weren't we side by side through 15?
Also, wait, David.
Yeah.
And okay, buddy, because IndyCar race control is absolutely
They're
100%
100% right all the time. All the time.
Spot on.
No,
yeah. Buddy, okay.
They've never called
Scotty
anything
Mack,
wrong.
you can't really use that argument.
No, well, that's true. It goes back to, I think, to answer Dev's question, is that for whatever reason the pack just wasn't packed up.
Yeah.
And again, what did I say? I said this. I mean, you go back and watch the DL500 Club stream where I was like, the field spread out. I thought it was going to be a way bigger crash than it was.
Well, first time that many cars at that track were going to the green. Remember last year it was all chopped in half for the All-Star whatever $1 million challenge it was.
Exactly. So you were always going to have problems like that. Let me ask you a harder question here, Tony. How do you feel? I know you kind of touched on it, but I guess we'll talk about it because obviously, and nothing against Bob. I really appreciate that Bob Pockris is covering racing, especially IndyCar, and obviously his contributions, that video has done gangbusters for IndyCar and growing the brand.
I know where you're going.
How do you feel about filming drivers when they're fighting? Because I know that's Bob. Bob does that in NASCAR all the time, and it's okay in NASCAR because that's kind of how things go. But in IndyCar, it doesn't happen as much. I think it's great that we're talking. It kind of goes back to the Bob Tasca thing. There's no such thing as bad publicity. It's probably got 1 million views, right, on Twitter or something like that. So if it's got 1 million views, I can't deny that it's a good thing.
Like I said, when the Bob Tasca thing happened, it was by like quadruple amounts the biggest thing that they had released over the entire weekend. Which also, NHRA, I saw that they're looking for a social media manager.
I did see that too.
Ooh, there you go.
Finish your question.
But so let me ask, I mean, how do you feel about, because I think, we all walk a pretty fine line. Anybody in this industry walks a fine line of making sure that you don't lose your access.
And credibility.
And you don't want to piss a driver off or make a driver look bad and not give them kind of a chance to cool off in a situation like that. And maybe it's just the difference of Bob works for Fox.
Yep.
And David Land works for David Land.
Yep.
And if David Land's going out there and making everybody look like it's the WWE, that's a problem. But if it's Bob, he can kind of justify it as, hey, I'm promoting the race. Yeah. Now, I kind of feel like I hope we promote the race as media members too.
Yeah.
But that's something that I probably wouldn't post.
Before I answer your question, let me ask you a question.
Okay.
What was worse? Or maybe that's not the right term.
Yeah.
But what was worse? Bob putting that out there or Marshall streaming the race that was up on the TV via Twitter while the blackout happened?
Well, I'll tell you, Marshall does not worry about what is thought about him anymore, which I really appreciate. I do genuinely appreciate that about Marshall. But, yeah, no, I mean, that definitely, again, we're talking about walking up the lines, right?
Yep.
And quite honestly, what Marshall did was the race ain't on. And I'm seeing the race, and the fans aren't. So let me. You know what? I looked at that.
The rule is you're not supposed to stream like the race while it's on a TV broadcast, right? So I can, on a practice day, I can take a video of a car going around and then post it. I'm not live streaming. They weren't on TV, so basically,
gray area.
Very much a gray area. But yeah, that was interesting too. When we saw that pop up, it had about 1,000 people watching.
I thought someone was going to march down there and slap the phone out of his hand, but it didn't end up happening. So, credit to Marshall. I mean, at least people got to see a couple of laps of the race that they wouldn't have otherwise gotten to see.
To answer your question, and we have seen this, you and I, where a driver and somebody in the media has a beef, and there's 2 and 3 different sides of the story. Is this now the precedence? Are we allowed, if there's a fight, because I was standing down with Santino last year in Detroit when him and Grosjean were going at it, right? So what's the line? Where is media people and fans? Because if a fan's standing there, up against the fence at IMS and is recording something and they put it out, they're going to get the views. So is this setting a precedence where, hey, if these drivers are having a moment, that we can do this and get away with it? And as you mentioned, the point was, well, he works for Fox, and Fox kind of does that. Sometimes, and there are media outlets that are looking and only looking for that beef and only looking for that drama to boost their numbers on their pages. That happens. I would say what you and I have always talked about. If you see it happening and you record it, I would say, like, hey, what are your thoughts? Can I put this out there? Secondly, if drivers don't want that, then take those conversations and do them privately. There's plenty of time after a race where you can go over to somebody's hauler or have a private moment with them where there's no opportunity for it to be recorded. On the flip side, I love some drama. I told Santino last year, either be done with the Grosjean stuff or hit him. Like one of the two. Yeah. Like, give me something. So it is a fine line. And we talked about some of the drama that we see in IndyCar, the crashes, the fights, some guy wrecking a pace car. That's what kind of gets you on in the mainstream. It's not the actual racing. So it is a very fine line that you have to walk when those things happen.
I can tell you a story, actually, of the line that I'm kind of willing to walk up to. I guess does
it depend on how much you like or don't? Well, we like most of the drivers.
Well, no.
Does it matter on the relationship that that you have with said driver.
No. I think from a credibility standpoint, I mean, I think now that the kind of seal has been broken, I'll be more willing to do that.
Yeah,
Personally,
that's a good call.
I don't want to really like. That's cool in NASCAR, short track racing.
Yep.
And if the fight really means something, let's remember here that Scotty and Dev were fighting over last place.
Yes.
Now, if Joseph goes up there and slaps Colton when they're second and third, okay, that's a little bit different, okay? But a couple of guys fighting for last, okay, not really that interested in it. I did have an opportunity to cover some beef at my only trip to Long Beach in 2022. I remember Sato put Pagano into the bushes over there in the fountain section, and I managed after the race to find Takuma and Simon.
Yeah.
And before I started the interview, I said, to Simon and to Sato, I said, "Hey, I'm going to ask you about this. Is it cool?" And they both said, "Yeah."
Yeah.
And ultimately, Pagano, Takuma was Takuma, and he was very polite about it and classy. And Pagano gets up there, and I'm walking with Pagano, and I'm like, "Can I ask you about Sato?" And he goes, "Yep. Go for it."
Yeah.
So I filmed Pagano. I don't remember exactly what he said, but he said something spicy. He ripped Sato, and I posted it, and ultimately NBC Sports picked it up and posted it everywhere, and it got a ton of attention. I think it even talked NBC into doing an extended post race on Peacock, believe it or not, because the next race, which I think was Barber, they were like, "We're doing an extra 30 minutes on Peacock," because I think somebody in a meeting somewhere got mad because I know someone at IndyCar walked up to me and said, "Be very careful about NBC," and I said, interesting. And then all of a sudden they were doing a 20-minute post race show the next race. I don't know. Did I do that? I don't know. But that's kind of the line I'm willing to walk up to. If I'm going to have beef on camera, I would probably prefer to have both of those drivers on record in front of my camera talking to me about it.
Yeah.
And then I can kind of tell the complete story. So I would say also, I found out today, and I'll tease.
Because it's going to happen again. It's going to happen again.
1000%.
You, me, somebody, we're going to be walking down after a race, as we always do, and something is going to happen. And I think what you have to think about is you don't want to make a driver look bad, which has happened before, as we saw last year up in Wisconsin. And then, you don't want to take that risk if you put a video out there and, I don't know, it's probably a long shot, but you don't want to be the guy that somebody loses a sponsor over. And obviously, Devlin's kind of paying for his way in there, but Scott McLaughlin does have some sponsors as well. But it is a very tough line, and it's now an even tougher line, as you mentioned, now that the seal's been ripped off.
At the end of the day, Bob works for Fox.
Yep.
He works for the TV, and we're independents. So at the end of the day, Bob can't, Joseph's not going to go to the next race and say, "I'm not talking to Bob."
Yep.
You have to talk to Bob.
Yeah.
Okay?
He has a safety net. He definitely has a
safety net. And also, the other thing I want to say is, have we gotten, soft?
Well, it's tough.
How is this little argument,
It's tough.
Because I do this stuff in karting in media. And, because I am Fox in the go-kart track and, trying to build up these drivers' personalities and show them off. If they do something stupid, out of my discretion, I choose to not show those things because I'm these guys don't have the brand to stand on.
Yeah.
Are we saying that, an IndyCar, that these guys don't have a brand to stand on if they do something stupid? Well, if anything, this helps. Look at how F1 embraces all these arguments. You have George Russell and Max arguing with
We love
each other.
drama.
These guys going at each other. These guys that we've been complaining for 3 to 4 years about these guys being best friends with each other. It's everybody in the field's best friends anyways.
They're all buddy-buddy, NBA style.
And then there's one argument, and it's for last. And then you hear about other people getting arguments like, "Oh, I didn't want to show that. I didn't want to post that." Or this guy didn't want me to do that. Or "Oh, we're worried about the sponsors." So what is why?
Devil's advocate, to the F1 point, I look at what F1's doing, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate we have to talk about drama. We have to have drama in this sport. Absolutely, there's going to be disagreements. For me, with my position, to your point, as an independent, I don't want to be the media person who has an adversarial relationship with the drivers. I don't want to be the person who goes to a bullpen like most of the Formula One journalists are right now and have Fernando Alonso go, "Yeah, I'm not talking to the media. Yep, I'm not talking. Yep, we had a great practice, and I'll go talk to the team." I don't want to be on that level with the driver.
And that's happened. That's happened in the last year in the IndyCar paddock. That's
it has.
Sure.
Oh, there's some guys who are not on good terms. And I got banned from a team one time. Now that team made up to me, so it was good.
I got you, my guy.
That's happened before.
I got you, buddy.
That was you?
I got you, buddy.
You did it. But
You're my buddy, David Land.
I don't know about that. If Tony was the one who got me unbanned from that team, that's great. Thank you very much. But
I think it started the conversation.
Well, that's true. Oh, yeah, that's right. Okay, never mind. We're walking up to that line again. But no, I mean, seriously, like, that's one of those things where...
Should we have a new segment called Walking Up to the Line?
No. Absolutely not.
Be fun.
Absolutely not. But that's the thing, is for me and my brand... we talk about my brand, right? Okay?
Yeah.
So from my brand's perspective... and I see this in the comments. A lot of people will point out, hey, you know, when you talk to the drivers, more often than not, they have a smile on their face when they start. And that's not the same for every media outlet.
No, it's not.
That's the standard that I want to keep. And so I have to walk a very fine line. I'm not saying I'm unwilling to do it. At some point, I'm sure Scott McLaughlin's going to do that again. Yep. And I will walk up to Scott with my phone out, and I'm going to start going, World Star! When it's happening. Apparently, he doesn't know what World Star is, by the way, so he doesn't understand that.
But we are at a point, as you mentioned, to where inside of the media, there are people that are just going fishing for drama, and those people aren't liked at times by the person that caused the drama or created the drama, or those that constantly are looking for drama. We all love drama. Look, they promote crashes in this sport on all of their highlight reels, and I get it. I just think if that ever happened to me, and I think I can speak for you on this, I think we would both use a common sense approach to say, how bad is this? How bad's the look? How bad's it going to make us look for recording it? But I do think that we do need some drama and some spicing up from time to time. However, there are people, as mentioned, and there are outlets, and there are media folks that are constantly looking for that drama for the click.
It's got to be grade A beef. Like I said, if you're slapping each other on the podium, great.
Yep.
If you're fighting for 20th, I'm probably not going to record that.
Yeah, because I would say, like, what's the line here? Because like if I'm thinking about it, I'm just like, you know, there are moments obviously where you will help someone out and be like, yeah, I'm just not going to post that. It's not a good look. But like, at what point? Where's the line? What is the line?
The line is how is this going to do more good than harm?
Yep. Harm
right?
than good.
Yeah. Or well, you want to, if you're going to post it, you want to do more good than harm.
Yeah.
1,000%. I think you have to look. Okay, how is this going to help the sport? How is this going to help me as an independent? How is this going to help the drivers? Or how much is this going to hurt the drivers? All of those things.
And we've seen that video by Bob went pretty viral. We've seen other media folks have a tweet or have a video that they took. Was it Mid-Ohio a couple years ago involving Andretti a little bit?
Yeah.
And that was a massive tweet for that media member. And, you know, you kind of you do have to ask yourself, is this worth getting views and clicks as to maybe pissing off a driver?
Or a team.
You know, if you're making money off Twitter and Facebook and you need those views, I guess I understand it. If you're trying to get to a certain amount of subscribers so that you can, it needs to happen organically too, I think. Like, you can't be running, I heard that this guy's going at that. I'm going to sprint down.
Well, that's how you get the reputation.
Yeah, you have to be right
You're an
place,
ambulance
right time.
chaser at that point.
You have to be right place, right time. All right, we've talked a lot of IndyCar in this episode. I know we're a little bit over our normal allotted time slot here on a Tuesday. That's the beauty of YouTube. Couple quick points. F1 over the weekend. Also, Kyle Larson riding the top line. Casey Kane rim riding it up there to the victory. I also want to mention that you and I will be at the IndyCar test on Thursday at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and then we will also be at the unveil of the new IMS museum. We'll be at a private media event on Monday morning, so you'll see some tweets, and we'll recap it here next Tuesday. The museum officially opens, I believe, next Tuesday, April the 1st, if not mistaken, so you can check out their website for more information. But those final bullet points, David, take it away.
Yeah, I mean, not much to say about NASCAR. Actually, ironically enough, NASCAR kind of didn't give us much to talk about this week.
Well, you were forced to watch the race.
Yeah.
Oh, that's true.
Did the trucks have a better rating than IndyCar?
Trucks did. The trucks had 900,000 on Fox, I believe.
It was on Fox.
It was on Fox.
Yeah. And Kyle Larson was in the race.
It was prime time, but it was also against basketball. So
True.
The argument that basketball is the real killer of ratings, maybe not so much.
Well, they got 10 million people watching.
Well, they're not
during
10
an IndyCar
million
race.
racing fans. I mean, I would say this: do we
So
really?
no, I think your argument is 100%.
Do I
wrong.
really
If you
care?
have 10 million
Hang on.
people watching a college basketball tournament, that 100% is taken away from your rating.
I'll be honest here, and this is going to sound like gatekeeping, and I'm going to get ripped for this, but I'm sorry. If you're going to choose a basketball game over a race, I don't care. Like, go watch basketball. You're a basketball fan. It is okay.
Are you going to say that in 2 weeks when the Masters are up against Long Beach?
If you're choosing golf over Long Beach, I can't help you. I can't help you.
It's a major event.
So is Long Beach. And that's
Is
the
it?
thing. Hang on a second. I'm going to get up on the chip here. This is the thing. And maybe I think as IndyCar, even if it's true right now, we need to be very careful about this messaging that IndyCar is always the second choice. That's a bad.
Well, they
that's a
clearly
bad precedent.
think that with the NFL that averages 15 million viewers. So why wouldn't they think that to a Masters that's going to be 10 to 13 million viewers into the NCAA
And
tournament?
when did that messaging start? The idea that the NFL is this big bad scary thing that we can't ever
Win?
touch. Yeah, I'm
Assuming-
thinking of A Year in a Person. 2013, Mark Miles.
Okay.
That's
yeah.
I mean, ultimately, that's where it started and continued, and that's, in my opinion, the wrong attitude. And I can't believe I'm getting this spicy 10 minutes over, but
Yeah.
that's what we're doing. Speaking of which, hopefully I don't get kicked out the minute I walk in there after this show, but we're looking forward to the Indy GP test. Got a few teams, got Ganassi, we got Coin, and we've got Juncos. What's up?
Yep.
I'm trying to find the chat, but someone mentioned earlier that there's an oval test tomorrow as well happening this week.
Where?
That's why I was trying to find
At
a
the
comment.
Speedway?
I have not been able to, no, like Nashville or
Oh, possibly.
somewhere. Someone getting their an oval ROP done. So, David, look at your testing schedule. After
Schwartzman?
this, and let's get to it.
That would be the first that I'd heard of it, but and I
It
think
would
we
have to be
prob-
Schwartzman, right? It would
mean,
have to be. He's the only one who hasn't gone to like Texas or anything.
Do you go Kyle Larson route and take him to Phoenix? I mean, that's a straight shot from where you were over the weekend. You just drive the truck down there. That would make sense.
I'll be honest. I'm completely blindsided by that.
Well, if this is happening, I would imagine that, I mean, because Nolan doesn't have to do ROP.
No, Nolan's good.
It's not going to be Jacob Abel if they're testing Jacob Abel on Thursday at the road course.
Jacob has already been at Texas Motor
and he's
Speedway.
already been at Texas.
passed it.
So it would be Schwartzman, and this is just pure speculation, and Kyle Larson went this route last year. Do you do it at Phoenix? Because it's technically, I guess, on the way home from driving that truck, leaving Thermal Club. So, I mean, I could probably shoot a text.
Nashville, Schwartzman, Louis Foster, and Isla. So it's Prema and Foster.
Okay, there you go.
At
That makes
Nashville?
sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I
Don't mind that.
To your Phoenix point, they should be racing in Phoenix this weekend. Sorry,
yeah.
not sorry. IMS Museum, I'm really excited for. I haven't been in there since May.
Yep.
I cannot wait to see it. It's going to be weird.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it, but I'm really looking forward to showing all of you what it looks like.
Maybe we'll get a sit-down interview that we can record with Jason in the classroom to talk about what you can expect when you come visit, whether that's over the next month or in the month of May. I'm looking forward to it. There's going to be a huge Penske dynamic inside of there, which is cool to check out because you don't normally, unless you're in Charlotte, you don't normally get to see all those cars under one roof. So certainly looking forward to checking that out coming up on Monday. I'll be at the Card Exchange coming up on Sunday. I'm going to drag your ass up there with me. We're going to go have a good time. Check out some cards. Any more last-second chats there, Kyle, before we sign off on this edition of Unverified? Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube, and we also want to thank the shop. Use Unverified 15 for 15% off. Get yourself a nice shirt right there. David has it on in the green. Nice IMS hat like I have. They just sent me another shirt too. So we're gonna have we'll get you guys hooked up with some more stuff, and we'll have them ready to go for the month of May.
Please.
Go ahead, Kyle.
So first, I want to shout out one thing of mine for this week, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go for it.
This weekend at my work, where I work at Kart Chaser, we're going down to Houston for the opening weekend of the SCUSA Pro Tour, and tune in on Sunday for some good racing at 2:30 Eastern. It's free on Kart Chaser, 2:30.
Kart Chaser's website or YouTube?
Kart Chaser YouTube.
Okay.
Live and free, baby.
Official Kart Chaser YouTube channel, 2:30. Watch some pro shifter karting. It's going to be awesome stuff. It's like the pro with the pro.
If you
stuff.
like IndyCar, you will like Pro Shifter.
Yep. And then just to end the show off on a light note, last question from the chat. This is fun. Who is the best IndyCar driver to not win a race? Vitor Mira or Raul Boesel?
That is a great one.
Oh, God, we're going to go for 15 minutes.
That is a great one.
Oh, it's tough. This one's tough.
I think we should come back next week with like those two career stats because I feel like they're so eerily similar. They had great runs at Indy where they had chances to win. They were with not top tier teams, but they were with kind of the a team that was right there waiting to maybe pounce and become something.
The other thing too is you are directly comparing two different eras because Raul Boesel's last IndyCar race was for Menard at the 2002 Indy 500, I think. Maybe he did some races for Bradley later in the season, but one of his last races was for Menard. One of Vitor Mira's first races was the 2003 Indy 500 for Menard. So you're comparing directly the 90s to the 2000s with those two drivers. Let's table that for next week.
Yeah,
that's where we'll start the show.
Top of my head, I'm going to say Raul Boesel, but I'm not 100% on.
I need to look at Vitor because I think there's the argument that I think you're going to make, which I would tend to agree with, is that it was harder to win in the 90s than in the 2000s.
100%.
But I don't think that's true. Remember the red car armada? You had to be in a Penske or Ganassi car, and I think, honestly, there was more parity in the 90s, but we'll talk about that on the next show.
I have two funny stories about both drivers, two personal stories that I will share next week about both Raul Boesel and Vitor Mira. Again, please don't forget to subscribe here on YouTube to Unverified. Every Tuesday, we are with you 8 o'clock Eastern Time. Thank you so much for being a part, and we will talk to you next time right here inside of the Fatheads Eyewear Studio. For David, Kyle, I'm Tony Donohue. Enjoy your week, and thanks for tuning in to Unverified.